Okay, today we're going to talk about the nervous system. The nervous system is responsible for sending messages to and from your brain, whether it's to move your foot or it's to pick something up. Whatever the response is, sensory or motor, it's going to be in charge of this. Obviously, think about how fast you do things. The messages that your brain is going to send is going to be extremely fast to go all over your body and decide things very quickly. So if you look at the picture in the background, that's an example of a nerve cell. You have about 7 billion of these in your body, and they're all responsible for sending these messages back and forth constantly. Alright, the nervous system is broken into two distinct parts. The first is going to be the central nervous system, which includes the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which includes everything outside the brain and spinal cord. So all the nerves that extend out from your spinal cord into your outer extremities all the way to your fingers and toes. Okay, the purpose of your brain is to send and receive messages from all body parts. It interprets and records these messages for later use, so that if you know that one time you touched a hot stove, you know not to do that again, because your brain has sent a message saying, hey, that caused pain. It's made up of about 100 billion neurons. It weighs about 3 pounds. In order to protect the brain, it's surrounded by not only our skull, but we have fluid surrounding the brain. The spinal cord is also made up of millions of neurons. It's the main communication link between the brain and the rest of the body. What the spinal cord is going to do is the spinal cord is going to be like the relay center between whatever message you're trying to send to the brain and the brain. It's not going to go directly to the brain. It's going to travel up the spinal cord into the brain, and then it will travel again back down the spinal cord out to the outer extremities. Your spinal cord's also in charge of reflexes, so whenever you go to the doctor and they do that reflex test on you, that is your spinal cord sending the message to kick your foot out. The spinal cord is protected by your vertebrae, so again, we cannot have any damage to the brain or spinal cord because these are two extremely important parts of our body and we need to protect them to the fullest extent. Alright, the brain is divided into 3 parts. The first part is the cerebrum. The cerebrum is your largest part. So if you look at the picture, it covers the whole top part of your brain. It controls voluntary conscious activities, so learning, memory, speech, body movements, etc. It's divided into 2 parts, the left and the right. Obviously, the left controls the right side of the body and the right controls the left side of the body. Now, it's been linked that left and right are responsible for different activities, so left is more artsy and right is more analytical and math. You can actually take quizzes to find out which part of your brain is more active to see which type of person you are, whether you're more artsy and creative or you tend to think more analytically and are better at math. Alright, the second major part of the brain is the cerebellum. The cerebellum controls balance and coordination. So that sits at the bottom of your brain in the back. As you can see in the picture, it almost looks like a piece of cauliflower. The final part we're going to talk about is the brainstem. The brainstem is what connects your brain to your spinal cord, and what's in control of is involuntary actions. So things like heart rate, blood pressure, breathing and swallowing, things that we don't have any control over, but they happen regularly to keep us basically alive. Alright, the peripheral nervous system is the body's nerve tissue that is not in the brain and spinal cord. So it's going to extend out to all the outer extremities. It's going to be both sensory and motor neurons. Now, sensory is going to be sent to the brain with information about something that's happening to you. Motor is going to be sent from the brain so you can come up with the appropriate response. How are these messages going to get to the brain, to and from the brain? We know that sensory and motor messages have to travel accordingly, and they have to travel extremely fast in order for us to react. But how do they get there? We use what are called neurons, and neurons are a nerve cell. So here's a picture of a neuron. What's going to happen is there are billions of these throughout your body, and they're going to send the messages at rapid speed, either sensory to your brain or motor away from your brain. So the neuron has many different parts. The dendrites are what's going to receive the impulse or the response. So they'll the response will come in through the dendrites, reach the cell body where the bulk of the neuron is. It's going to travel along the axon. And the axon is literally like your train tracks. So it's going through all the way to the other end, to the axon terminal, where the message will get sent on to the next nerve cell. Now, the axon is protected by something called the myelin sheath. And the myelin sheath is basically an insulation, so that you're not only can you protect your axon, but you're sending the message a whole lot faster. Alright, so since neurons don't connect to each other, we have a space in between each neuron. So what that space is called is a synapse. So it can be between a muscle cell, a gland cell, or another neuron. The presynaptic cell is the cell that carries the electrical impulse to the synapse. So that's going to be the one, whatever direction it's going in. The postsynaptic cell is the cell that receives the impulse. And remember, this is happening at rapid speed, so you can send information as quickly as possible. So here's what the impulse is going to look like. When the action potential, or that nerve impulse, reaches the end of the nerve or the neuron, it's going to reach that space in between. So what it's going to do is going to trigger the release of calcium. So calcium is going to send a message to the postsynaptic neuron through the little channel receptors, which you can see in blue on the picture. And that charge of the calcium, because the calcium has a positive charge, is going to cause the membrane to open up and allow that action potential or that nerve response to continue through. So again, this is happening at rapid speed. This is something that you unconsciously don't even realize you're doing constantly. So that's going to conclude a little bit on the nervous system. Check back next week for upcoming videos on other human body systems, and you can see how your body works fully.